Joining me now live is Elliot Abrams. He served in several US foreign policy positions, advising 3 different US presidents on security, and has most recently been the US Special Representative for Iran, also appointed by Joe Biden in a role as well. Appreciate your time today on a brief visit to Australia. Joe Biden's given an address. I know you've been sort of travelling around, but he did both reiterate support for Israel, but also talk about the need to avoid civilian casualties. What's your view on to what extent Israel is doing that? Are they being responsible enough in their strikes?
Absolutely. You will never find a war in which civilians are not at risk and sometimes harmed. The first thing Israel did was to ask Gaza civilians to move south, which is absolutely in accordance with the laws of war. Try to get civilians out of the way. It was Hamas who was telling them, no, stay there. Don't move. So I think they both are and are going to be trying very hard to meet all of the standards that all of us hope are in place for every war. But it's a tragedy. Innocent people are going to be hurt in Gaza, and it is all because Hamas created a war.
There's always a grey area, I suppose, of that element, because how careful is being careful enough? You make a point that you're never going to have 0 civilian casualties, sadly, particularly in a densely populated place such as Gaza. What about, though, electricity, water and aid? Should there be more effort made now that this sort of immediate aftermath is over to make sure that civilians are not effectively being punished in any way?
There should be as great an effort as is possible, but I'm struck by a couple of things. One, the standard to be imposed on Israel should be the standard we lived by, you lived by in Australia in the Iraq War. You cannot impose, hopeless and impossible standards that would actually mean Hamas gets away with the massacres that they undertook. I'm also struck by the delays in getting aid in from Egypt. 5.5 million people fled Syria to Turkey, to Iraq, to Jordan, where they were safe. Nobody's being allowed to leave Gaza into Egypt. Sinai's empty. So I think there ought to be a lot more discussion of what Egypt and the space in Egypt might be able to do to allow Gaza civilians to get out of the way of the war and to get more supplies in. Why is it taking a week to get the first supplies in?
If we do have this ground invasion, which appears imminent, it's going to be a difficult one for Israel. There's so many different elements. Underground tunnels, Israeli uniforms stolen, so presumably Hamas soldiers will be wearing them. What would a victory look like? How achievable is it to sort of shut down the Hamas military capability? And could that lead to Hamas no longer ruling Gaza?
I think first, the real victory is eliminating Hamas as a military threat. Israelis can't live with Hamas next door, massacring men and women and children and babies and elderly patients. That's impossible. So the real victory to begin with is eliminating Hamas as a military institution. But we ought to think also about the liberation of Gaza. The people of Gaza never voted for Hamas. They didn't choose to live this way under a terrorist group. I hope that at the end of the war, whether that's a month from now or 2 months from now, all of us can be thinking very seriously about who will govern Gaza. And, the United States in particular, but Egypt, Jordan, the Arab League, should be thinking now about what kind of international support there can be for a decent, non-terrorist government of Gaza that would serve the people of Gaza rather than serving these bloody, despicable terrorist goals of killing Jews.
In terms of what Israel is hoping to be able to do, part of it will be a moral case because it wants the support of the rest of the world, the US, Australia and others. The hospital strike is something that all the intelligence we're getting so far is that it was not Israel. It was a rocket intended for Israel, in fact. Do you think the US will be releasing some form of evidence on that? Because otherwise For, someone in my seat, a journalist, it feels a bit like the fog of war. Is there evidence that can be released in that aspect?
Well, I wish more journalists would actually take that position about the fog of war, because an awful lot jumped instantly to say, well, Hamas says 500 people were killed because Israel bombed a hospital. They didn't say fog of war, we don't know. They reported the Hamas claims. I hope the U.S. can, and Israel can, and any others who have intelligence, release more of this. But truthfully, I don't know how much good it's going to do. I think if you've made up your mind already, and unfortunately many people in the Arab world have, that Israel did this, and you're out demonstrating, the fact that the United States produces evidence that it did not happen that way is unlikely to persuade you. Here in Australia and in Europe, I think it will have an impact.
As to Australia's role in all of this, it's obviously a long way away. We're a crucial ally for the US. The Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, said he won't be visiting Israel, though, on the way to seeing Joe Biden. What did you make of that?
I think it's a mistake. I mean, it wouldn't be a great detour. He could do it and not lose much time. Many other Democratic leaders, it's not just Rishi Sunak, Macron's probably going, the German Chancellor went, I think there'll be others. And I think it would have been a demonstration of a desire to see terrorism defeated. It is why Australia was in the Iraq War, to defeat terrorist groups. And that's what Israel's trying to do here, to defeat a different terrorist group, Hamas.
Okay. So a mistake not to go. As to how all of this ends up, because you've previously had a role as a special representative regarding Iran, what's your concern around Iran's involvement here, and how much that could sort of spread this conflict?
This is central. It's absolutely critical. If you look at Hezbollah today and Hamas today, how did they get to be as large and powerful? It's Iran. Iran gives about $700 million a year to Hezbollah and about 150 or 200 million to Hamas. So none of this would be happening if it weren't for the hand of Iran, which also, as we know, has a nuclear weapons program underway. They are the main problem in the Middle East. And if you're interested in Middle East peace, you have to be interested in Iran. And we are on the side of the people of Iran, who quite clearly loathe this regime. But as we think about Gaza, as we think about Lebanon and Hezbollah, as we think about Iraq or Yemen, what's behind most of the troubles is Iran. It's not the people of Iran, it's not the country of Iran, it's the Ayatollahs, it's the Islamic Republic.
Elliot Abrams, appreciate your time today. I know it's a whirlwind trip to Australia. Good to talk. Thank you.
Glad to be here. Thank you.